Your Honor, we call Jeremy Brewer.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Could you state your name and spell it for the record?
Jeremy Brewer, Jeremy, last is Brewer.
And Mr. Brewer, where are you employed?
I'm currently employed by the Michigan Department of State Police.
And how long have you been with state police?
25 years.
So I don't want to go through your whole career, but what is your current position?
I'm currently assigned to a drug supervisor in a narcotics unit in the city of Flint at the Flint Area Narcotics Group.
Prior to your assignment there as a lieutenant, where were you? What was your job?
My previous assignment, I was the assistant section commander at the 1st District Special Investigation Section for approximately 7 years.
And I know we'll keep going back, but right before that, what did you do?
Prior to that, I was a detective sergeant on the same unit for about 3 years.
So just so the court understands, with the Michigan State Police, Michigan State Police is broken up into districts, right?
Correct.
And what district are we in?
Currently, we're in the 1st District.
First district. And we were in the first district back in, when you were employed at the Special Operations.
Yes.
And so as a detective sergeant in that unit, what did you do?
We were in charge. We had 9 counties in our district, and Lenawee being one of them. And so we were assigned several different types of cases, a lot of which are more high-profile cases, officer-involved shootings, cold case homicides, public corruption, things of that nature.
So fair to say you were a specialized detective that worked in a district depending on what was happening?
Correct.
So would you also provide support to local units?
Yes.
Including local state police folks?
Absolutely, yes.
And at some point, you were assigned the Skelton case?
Correct.
Do you remember when that was?
I was in the late fall of 2013.
So when you were assigned to this case, to the Skelton case, I can imagine a bunch of files were turned over to you.
Correct.
Will you describe that?
Sure. Once Chief Weeks and the Rensselaer Police Department decided to turn this officially over to the state police, we set up a date and time for them to officially turn over all items of evidence and property to us, including all case files, evidentiary items. And so we set up a date and time to pick that up, and then that was transferred over to my office in Lansing, and it was at that time that I started to digest and get into the case.
Okay. How many files? Any idea?
I mean,
Voluminous?
thousands and thousands of documentation. Again, upwards of maybe 100 pieces of property, approximately. And then we also had things such as prison correspondence and prison phone call databases and tips. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of boxes of paperwork.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Judge, can you see that?
I can see it. The text is a little small.
Judge, I have it on an 8.5 by 11. I can't read it. It's so small, but if you would like, you're welcome to try to look at this.
That looks like it may not be useful.
Would you like for us to move it closer to you?
I mean, if you want to.
It's up to you.
Well, it's right in the middle so that he and I can both see it.
Sure.
Sure.
There we go. Just make sure that you can see your witness. I can read it better. Can you still read it?
I think I'll be okay.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay.
If you need to move, if you need to take a break,
Okay.
let me know. Now, some of this is going to be repetitive, but I don't know how else to present this to the court other than you kind of going through what you learned
Sure.
in your review of this case. really what I want you to do is show the court the information that you had to go through to get to the point where you could actually start your investigation.
Okay.
Um, so I'll stop you if I think there's things we need to add, but if you could please
Sure.
Tell the court about, let me back up one more thing. So as part of these case files being turned over to you, there was a somewhat of a timeline.
Correct.
Correct. And this timeline was probably made by the Federal Bureau of Investigation with input from other agencies, but you took that timeline and you created a more detailed timeline. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Not only did you recreate part of their timeline, but you also filled in up to present day.
Yes, sir.
So could you start and please tell
Sure.
the court what you went through?
So, in preparing myself to get a better understanding of this case, this timeline was created. It essentially is more of a Reader's Digest version of all the, I guess we call them case highlights of the things that happened before I took the case over. And so we put this together just so we'd have a pretty concise document that we could reference for some dates and some times. A lot of the things that I'm going to be going through aren't a full, detailed, isn't all the information relating to that specific tip or that specific internet search. It's just, again, highlights more for me
Right.
and for the court, for the prosecutor's office to reference if need be.
Okay.
So it started off basically September 8th in 2010. Some of the information leading up into what happened on that Thanksgiving Day. John had called Tanya initially he wanted to move to Jacksonville, Florida. Tanya did not want to make that move. September 13th of 2010, John Skelton left, took all three boys to Florida. He was told he'd be charged with parental kidnapping, and he then returned to Morenci shortly thereafter. He still left for Florida with Alexander and Andrew. September 15th of 2010, Judge Noe signed an ex parte motion giving Tanya exclusive parental rights of the Skelton children. September 20th, after driving to Florida with Tanner, Tanya escorts John back to Morenci with Alexander and Andrew. September 21st, 2010, Judge Cole in Duval County, Florida, orders John and Tanya to return to Michigan with the boys. Moving forward to October 30th, 2010, there's an email account created, John Skelton 1971 at yahoo.com under a specific IP address. November 6th, about a week later, a Yahoo email account was created under the name of Joanne_Taylor at yahoo.com under the same IP address. There was also an account created under Cafe Mom, Mom for Everything at the same time. November 6, 2010, John sends emails titled Finish to Tanya and states, I'm sorry, some of this is a little difficult to read. I can't take all the hurting you're doing to me. That was November 6th. Just another week later, John Skelton's email search conducts a search for poison and can rat poison kill a person. Fast forwarding another 6 days, Tanya is contacted by the Mom for Everything under the Joanne Taylor email address on the website Cafe Mom, claiming to be Joanne Taylor. The next day, November 20th, John Skelton's laptop conducts the following Bing search in his search engine of how to break a neck and spine, spinal cord, and cerebellum. And that was the last search conducted at 1735 hours. November 21st, the next day, Morenci Police Officer Hilliard was dispatched to a 911 call at 112 East Congress, which was where John resided, for a 7-year-old boy who claimed his father was missing. Next, we have November 22nd, the following day. Tanya's sons tell Tanya that John did advise the boys that Tanya was a sex offender. November 25th, 2010, Tanya tells John there'll be no chance for reconciliation at that point. 2 days later, November 24th, John posts a Facebook message, "I love my wife very much, and may God and Tanya forgive me." The same day, approximately 3 hours later, a friend of John's, Herschel Ward, received a Facebook message from John saying, "I'm killing myself tonight, but right now I am fine." Later that same day, Tanya drops the boys off at her parents'. Tanya goes to clean a house. John is scheduled to pick up the boys at 3 o'clock. This is the last time Tanya sees her children, sees the boys. November 24th, 2010, Herschel Ward again receives a message from John, which reads, "I was going to last week, but Tanya opened up and I was going to move back in. This weekend, the kids found out that Tanya was a sex offender and told her. Now Tanya thinks I told them to be hurtful and mean. She won't listen, and I can't take her silence again." The next day, November 25th, cell phone analysis reflects John Skelton's target telephone remained in the geographic area consistent with his residence throughout the day. Same day, November 25th, Tanya spends Thanksgiving Day at her sister Tennille's house in Kunkel, Ohio. John's laptop did start using the internet November 25th between the hours of 1:38 and 4:04 p.m. November 25th, during roughly that same time frame, John did reference the Michigan Sex Offender Registry on the internet. Around, again, that same time frame, November 25th, the neighbor Adam Johnson and Chris Hawker see 2 children playing outside of the Skelton residence. So that was about 2:30 in the afternoon. November 25th at about 4:15, John Skelton leaves a voicemail for John Kaselka. Kaselka reports hearing children's voices in the background during this phone call. November 26th at 01:37, Skelton logs into the internet and visits allrecipes.com, marriagetoday.org, and reads an article, "Our kids better off if we divorce?" Then goes to Cafe Mom at approximately 1:41 a.m. and a message is composed. Moving forward to November 26th at 0500 hours, John Skelton's phone was located approximately 2.3 miles from a Verizon site. 480 moved to Sector 2 and 3 near Pioneer, Ohio. Again, previous to this, Skelton's phone was located 3.3 miles from the residence, which is indicative of the phone moving away from the residence. At approximately 5 a.m. on November 26th, Christy Schaefer and George Zuvers drove by the Skelton house to see if John was up for Black Friday shopping, and his vehicle was not there, which is odd because at that point, his vehicle would usually be there at that time of the morning. And then just a few moments later, there was another cell phone ping. The cell phone was targeted between 2.2 and 3.7 miles from the Verizon cell tower near the Lazy River campground, and that was marked as a significant landmark in the area at that time.
Okay, is there anything remarkable to you that you wanted to talk about with regard to this one first?
No, this is just, again, showing kind of from when I first got to the case, how I got to the point of getting myself prepared for what all had taken place during that previous 3 years.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Casper, you can make him read all of them if you want to, but you could also stack them up over here, and if you give me a few minutes, I can get through them a little faster than
Sure.
he can read, unless you want to read them. It's up to you.
That's up to...
We would rather you read them, Judge.
Okay. I don't need, do you want them read into the record? I guess that's the real question.
No.
Okay, all right. Ms. Stang, have you had an opportunity to review these?
I have not.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I can't see the witness, so I'm gonna move him back.
Okay.
He can
yeah.
read it to you.
Yeah, that's fine, especially if Ms. Stang needs to know what it says too.
Read that?
Yep.
So, Mr. Brewer, Lieutenant Brewer, you reviewed all these case files. You and the Michigan State Police compiled these timelines.
Correct.
we are going to allow the judge to read them on her own. Ms. Ann, you're welcome to read them as well. But essentially, what we have on these boards are what's been testified to
Okay.
in this trial thus far. And so we want to pick up with you on from the date you started compiling the timeline, and you then actually went to meet with John Scott.
Okay.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure.
process?
So it took me several months to get this timeline created, to get my bearings, for lack of a better term, and to understand all the different nuances and facets of this investigation. Several months later, I believe it was in February, early 2014, is when I first sat down with John Skelton, introduced myself to him, and explained that the Michigan State Police would now be the lead investigative agency moving forward in this case.
And what was one of your goals?
My goal was to develop a rapport with John. Obviously, I had not been involved with any of this prior. I had no knowledge of who John Skelton or Tanya or any of the boys were. I came into this from a very raw perspective of not knowing, other than what might have been in the news briefly. But so I really wanted to try to get to understand John and know him. And just at that point, you know, we wanted to find the boys. And that's my main message to John. My main mission was to become allies with him and to try to get as much information from him that I could, so I could then do my job properly and try to find these boys for him.
What was his reaction when you tried to talk to him about this?
We would talk about everything under the sun, his family, the weather, sports, prison life. But if I ever directed the conversation toward why I was truly there, or about the boys, he would shut down and would never give me a response. He would claim that everyone was out to get him, he didn't trust anyone, and that essentially he wasn't going to provide me with any information.
Did you ever go through the fact that you knew that all of his stories were lies?
I did. I explained to him that, you know, from my perspective, coming into this again from a very raw perspective, that everything that I had read just didn't make sense, and that from a lot of the investigators that I spent hours briefing and debriefing with to try to gain a better understanding of this case, that there wasn't one person that thought he was telling any sort of truth. And again, when I would ever confront him with anything that would make him feel uncomfortable, he would just shut down. I would explain to him time and time again that if his boys were out there, they could be in danger. He gave them truly to a group that were strangers, that he has no idea what they could be going through, and that I was not here to try to keep Skelton in prison, keep John in prison, but to find the boys. And no matter how much I would plead with him or do my best to explain to him that I was not his enemy, I was an ally for him, he still would not shed any light as to what happened.
Now, part of this getting ready for these interviews, you interviewed Tanya.
Correct. I spent a lot of time with Tanya.
A lot of time with Tanya. You also interviewed John's family. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So what did you interview?
So at the time, his family lives in Jacksonville. At the time, his father, John Sr., Jacksonville, Florida, yes, sir. He's now deceased, but at the time he was alive. So it was his father, his mother Roxanne, and his sister Lucinda in the same vicinity. So I did go there and speak to them on numerous occasions to try to get some insight as to, what they thought happened, any information they would be willing to share, try to find out more about John's past, and maybe leading up to this, things that would be helpful. So yes, we spent a lot of time with them as well.
So it wasn't just one trip?
No, multiple.
Multiple trips over a 10-year period?
Yes, sir.
10, 12-year period?
Yes, sir.
So it's fair to say you got to know his family fairly well.
Very well.
What did you ever learn from him?
My sense was that, number one, I don't believe they had any knowledge of what John did. I believe that it's very hard for them to come to grips with the fact that their son probably killed their grandkids. I believe that they knew and they know that he did something horrible, but they just come up short of admitting that to me. They want to help, but they also don't want to get themselves in a situation where they're more on the side of the police than they are his son.
Now, you say, we know you had your first interview with Mr. Skelton. How many times, I mean, I know, I'm not asking for an exact number, but how many interviews did you do with him?
At minimum half a dozen. There were times when we would correspond through, electronic things. If there was something I was following up with him quickly and I couldn't make the trip to the prison was, a good distance away from my current, my work site at the time. But there was contact with John dozens of times over the course of this, and now we're into the 12th year of me being involved.
Now, I want to refer you to your timeline. Could you go through your timeline? Now, this is 2013.
Correct.
Forward.
So along with a lot of the investigative police reports that I obtained from this, there were also boxes and boxes of paper copy tips and leads that had come in. At the time, the FBI had a tip system electronically. I believe it was called Rapid Start. That also then transformed itself into another system. So there was also electronic copies of a lot of the duplicate tips. Typically, when you get a tip that comes in, it's a carbon charge copy. Whoever is the intake person of that tip would then take the tip on paper, give the investigator the carbon charge. They would then investigate that. When that tip was closed out, they'd marry the two forms up together, give it back to me, and then that tip would be closed. So it was a very monumental task to cross-reference both the electronic database along with the dozens of boxes of tips to find out what had been closed, what was still open. And so that took, in effect, several years to work through. We had several of us that were looking at those. Anything that looked like it had some investigative meat to it, they would give that to me, and we'd determine if we needed to send people out for that. And so that was, honestly, it took a very, very long time to work through that methodically. And we did that, but it took a very long time.
And do you believe you tracked down any
Absolutely.
tip,
Anything that had an investigative lead that looked even remotely legitimate, even to the point where we would get calls from, various psychics and mediums, things that sometimes were out there a little bit. Other times there was information relayed that seemed a little bit more specific. And for me to then allocate resources, whether it be an aviation unit, a dive team, a cadaver dog, state police has been excellent with giving me all the resources I would need, but I'd have to make the determination, is it worth, a lot of resources, time and money and all these things to put a group of people out investigating this tip. And if there was anything that was remotely legitimate, we would do that. And unfortunately, to this day, we've never found the boys.
So in all these tips that you investigated, and I assume we're talking hundreds if not
Hundreds.
thousands. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say into the thousands.
Okay. Any sign of life
No.
of the three kids?
No. We've had a few that stood out, and I've referenced some of those on the timeline. There was 2015. There was a baseball that was found in near the Lazy River campground, and as I referenced earlier, that was a point where the cell phone pinged at, and so that was kind of found in a remote area, I believe, by a hiker or a hunter, and so that one sounded a little bit interesting. And we tested that for DNA. It came back, negative for the boys. We got another tip. I believe it was in 2016, 2017. Someone advised they believe they saw John Skelton's van in Fulton County, Ohio, near a body of water. The tip was that they saw the van. They believe it was on Black Friday, early morning. Not much to go on, but again, we saw it through. At that point, we had contacted Fulton County. They were very gracious and allowed the Michigan State Police Underwater Recovery Unit, the Marine Dive Team, to come in, and we spent a full day there, all of our dive team members diving and dragging that pond for hours. And that led to nothing, essentially. So we had things such as that would come up if there was something that, in the hot zone, we call it, from that Morenci to Lazy River, Kunkel, Pioneer, anything in that zone that came in around that time frame, we would investigate fully.
Now, there came a time where there were some bones
Correct.
discovered in, was it Montana?
Yes. In 2018, we had received some information that there was a residence in Montana. I believe they had conducted some type of search warrant. The local authorities had done it out there. And there was a box of bones that was found in an outbuilding, like a garage or a shed. The initial finding it wasn't an anthropologist, but it was someone with a little bit of expertise into human bones, had advised that there were 3 distinct individuals that were identified in this box of bones, and they all appeared to be under the age of 10 years old, I believe. And so once that information started hitting law enforcement channels, it made its way to me pretty quickly, because obviously we had 3 missing boys under that age. And we had immediately contacted local authorities to go out there and try to get ourselves into this. Again, they were very gracious to allow us to become part of their investigation. We conducted some interviews with neighbors and with some of the folks involved in that community. In the meantime, those bones were then, I believe, sent to University of North Texas, which houses the DNA database, and the true experts are there. And then over the course of I believe it was a couple of months. So we had been investigating this while the bones were being examined, assuming that maybe these were the boys, and let's go all in. We received information within a couple of months that these bones were actually determined to be prehistoric, which is they consider prehistoric anything over 100 years old. And so at that point we were able to close this tip out, because obviously they were not our boys.
In 2018, did you also have a chance to have a talk with John Skelton about an individual by the name of Mose Gingrich?
Yes. This interview with John was probably the most significant interaction I had had with him in the 5 years prior, leading up to this, with my involvement. I had an interview scheduled with John at the prison. I believe the previous interviews before that, he had, the only time he had mentioned the boys and with Tanya is that he wasn't going to, again, talk to me about it, because his boys were never going to be safe if they were going to come back to Tanya. And so I had talked to him and advising him that if we could make arrangements for maybe his parents to have the boys, or, this court system, however that would work, would that lead him to giving us some information. Again, he didn't really respond with much. He kind of shut down once I actually offered him some solutions and some help with that small piece of information. So leading up to this interview with John, I began talking to him, and just, again, started the interview with, hey, let's really examine if we can get these kids somewhere else, and what are we going to do? He seemed to be fairly comfortable with that. We had a pretty good rapport. It was never adversarial. He would never really give me information, but we had a pretty good relationship, actually. And as we were talking and discussing various things, he kind of got quiet, and he said, well, I want to tell you something. And he said, you need to find Mose. And of course I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, well, what's Mose? Who's Mose? And he said, Moses Gingrich. Again, asked him who Moses Gingrich was. And he had said, well, the group, or the individual who took his boys, showed him a picture of Mose and said, this is who you contact if you want to get your boys back. And of course, for him to tell me something like that was so far out of the ordinary. He never would even let me talk about the boys and what sports they like to play or what TV shows they like to watch, let alone something investigatively that would shed some light on this case. So that was fairly fascinating to me, that he decided at this point in time to give me a name at least. He didn't say much more than that, other than the group told him. He said the group gave him a photograph of Mr. Gingrich, but he burned it, or he lost it during the 2 days around Thanksgiving and Black Friday, but that's who I needed to contact. So once the interview was concluded, immediately I got to work on Moses Gingrich. After just a few minutes of searching, found that he, being Moses, was a former TV personality on an Amish TV show. I don't actually recall the name of the show at this second, but essentially Moses was on a show relating to the Amish. He was a former Amish person, And during that time, he and his wife were getting out of the Amish community, and they were setting up some sort of halfway house or a system set up to where other kids and people who wanted to remove themselves from the Amish community, they would assist them in how to use a cell phone, how to use the internet, how to drive a car, those types of things. So that's Moses Gingrich. That's who he was.
So he would help people
Leave.
not go in.
Correct. Yep. Correct. So we found, again, that was, a simple internet search, honestly, we found Moses quickly and were able to determine that's a little bit of his background. I was able to track down a phone number for Mr. Gingrich and call him. I believe he was from Arkansas at the time, currently working as a truck driver. He was out of the TV realm at that point. And so I explained why wanted to reach out to him. Of course, I think he actually was driving at the time and, had to pull his semi over to digest, the magnitude of the conversation. And it was difficult initially because a lot of the information that I wanted to share with him, it's difficult to do that over the phone, especially something as sensitive as this. I'd rather see him face to face. But just due to the distance, I did need to disclose a little bit. And that led us to asking him if he'd be willing to come to Michigan and to do an interview with us and to possibly even get in front of John and to help us find these boys. Moses was 100% on board. He wanted to, number one, help us if there was something to do to help 3 missing children, but to also find out why this person in Michigan in prison for parental kidnapping and child endangerment would be mentioning his name. And so literally within just a few short months of John mentioning Moses to me, we had flown Moses to Michigan and conducted an interview with him. And then I went from there.
Okay, what happened next?
So next, Moses again agreed to meet with John. We cleared this with Michigan Department of Corrections. They said, absolutely, do what you need to do. And so I went back. John was kind of confused because usually, every few months he'd get used to me showing up, and this was probably off timing just a little bit. And so I spoke with John and I said, hey, we've got some, really, really good news. I said that, we were able to track down Moses Gingrich. And his response, it just appeared 100% fake initially. He was like, well, did he find the boys? And it's not the kind of response that, if we've just found your boys, you probably would be a little bit more excited or have a little bit more of a reaction than some fake rehearsed response. I said, no, we haven't found the boys, but he actually, agreed to talk to you, and we have him here today, and that's when I brought Moses in to the room. John's reaction to this was a little bit just unbelievable to me. He became white as a ghost. He couldn't formulate a sentence. He started visibly shaking, almost to the point I thought he might have a medical response. Moses sat down, introduced himself to John, and it took a moment for John to realize kind of what was going on. John never thought in a million years we would, what I believe, call his bluff on this. Again, Moses introduced himself to John and just said, this is why I'm here. This detective explained to me that you mentioned my name, and I just want to know, what I can do to help. How did you hear my name? And over the course of a few minutes, John was able to compose himself a little bit and basically told Moses the same thing, that this group gave him this photograph. He goes, I did kind of recognize you when you walked in. And again, John gave no other information. He had nothing to say. He had no excitement, no elation that we found this person who he initially told me would help us find the boys. He looked scared to death. And so for me, it was, and I've always, I had my own beliefs on what happened to the boys, but, was this the time that maybe John was actually giving me something that would be helpful? And for him to show in a complete opposite reaction to what he should be showing if we found the one person that can find the boys, it was just very enlightening to me as to his true involvement with whatever horrible it was that he did.
So you have Moses Gingrich there. He ask any questions about where the boys are for Moses?
No, he, I believe he explained the story to Moses about this group, giving him a photograph of Moses, and then Moses countered that with, well, that's very odd because I was Amish, but I've spent a lot of years trying to help people get out of that lifestyle, and so there would be no reason for someone to think I'm trying to hide or be a part of 3 boys going missing. And in talking with Moses leading up to this and then even afterwards, because I had mentioned to him this underground group and things that the Amish had been mentioned a few times about being involved. And after talking to Moses, being a true expert in that arena, it was so clear that the Amish would want nothing to do with the media attention, the law enforcement attention. They're a very, very helpful community. They would want to help anyone, but the links they would have to go through in their community to hide 3 boys for a decade plus would just be unheard of. And he said, I don't even think they could pull it off. And to hear that from someone that not only knew about the Amish but was and lived it was just very, very insightful.
Did you confront John with the fact that he lied again?
Absolutely. And anytime I had a stern conversation with John about the boys, he would just shut down. He gave me no traction or no ability to, other than just to talk and to let him know that this was kind of the last straw. This was it. You've told lies from start to finish, and then you went 5 or 6 years silent with not saying anything. And the one time that you decide to give us some information, it again is a distraction technique to throw us off and to waste more of my time. And to waste Mr. Gingrich's time and all the resources that were put into flying him up from Arkansas and meeting with him, staying in hotels, airline flights, all these things that go into something like that was just him wasting our time.
Just a game.
Just a game.
Now, you confronted Mr. Skelton multiple times about the different stories he's told.
Yes.
And each time, you informed him that he was lying. Is that right?
Yes.
Any question in your mind that John Skelton's a liar?
100% he's a liar.
Now, in 2022, there was another tip.
Yes.
What was that?
So in 2022, I received a phone call. Again, it came through the tip avenues. It was a reference to a kid out in California. I believe he was 21, 22 in that age range. The tip information said there's a kid from California. His name is Alex, and he believes he is Alexander Skelton. And so when I read the information, there wasn't a lot there, but I knew the age was going to be similar. And eventually there was a photograph attached to this individual, and I mean he was a white Caucasian male that, it's just hard to tell what the boys would look like, what Alex would have looked like now. But we had a really difficult time getting a hold of him. He gave us a cell phone number, but he was in between residences. And so we were finally able to talk to him. Within just a couple of moments, it was very clear to me that this individual was very mentally disturbed. He even said so. He admitted to that he had had quite the life growing up. He had no idea who he was. He was fascinated with missing persons, TV shows, and articles, and media because of the fact that maybe he would eventually find who he was one day. He came across this case, and he had convinced himself that he was Alexander Skelton. I believe it was out in San Bernardino, California. So I initially had reached out to the detective bureau out there, again, very gracious to assist, and was able to set up a meeting between this Alex and detectives from that department. They were able to do a DNA swab, conduct an interview with him. They also confirmed that I believe he even had a mental order in their police computer system for this individual. And after a few short weeks, and when that DNA test came back, it was found that he was not Alexander Skelton.
Now, throughout all these years that you've been investigating this case, you have had age progression
Yes.
photos made?
Yes.
And you have distributed these nationally, not just locally.
Correct. So along with the actual boots on the ground police work, knocking on doors, conducting interviews. We have also been heavily invested with the media. We have, we've gotten calls and done interviews with Court TV, John Walsh, Nancy Grace, multiple different CNN shows. I believe there was a missing Fox News show that we had done at one point. Channel 4 in Detroit ended up doing a 10-series podcast, fully invested into this case. A lot of detail, a lot of information. That show actually hit some of the national outlets. It won a bunch of awards just to show that this has hit nationally. We've not just hit Lenawee County News, we have hit, the national outlets. And with that, we have, again, other than getting a few tips here and there that ended up amounting to nothing, even with hitting a national stage, we have yet to receive anything that has led to us finding the boys alive.
In those immediate investigations that were taking place, there was also one that included the Amish, wasn't it?
Believe so.
And nothing.
No. Again, the Amish, the few times we've contacted them, they have not enjoyed talking to us. It's just not in their wheelhouse to do so. It's not part of their belief system. And there's never been one person in the Amish community or that have connections into the Amish community that can get us into those resources that have even giving us any hint that this would be something that they would do.
So in 12 years, any indication that these children are alive?
No, they're not alive.
Is there any doubt in your mind that John Skelton killed these 3 children?
No doubt whatsoever.
And is there any doubt in your mind that they were killed on or about November 26, 2010?
No doubt in my mind.
One thing, because we didn't go through the timeline, I would like to mark it and enter it as an exhibit. Would we call it petitioner's exhibit 1?
Sure. So there's 4 total.
Yes.
Any objections?
No objections.
Very well. We'll receive all 4 as exhibit 1.
And I would ask that it be published to the court.
Yes, absolutely.
No further
I'll
questions?
read them later if that's okay with you.
That's fine. No further questions, Mayor.
Ms. Stang.
Just to kind of summarize everything, can you name all of the law enforcement agencies that you're aware of that have played a part in this case?
No. I know initially we had the FBI, all the sheriff's departments locally. We had Fulton, Williams County, Ohio, Lucas County, Michigan State Police, but the Michigan State Police has 29 police posts. I would not be surprised if every post in some way has touched this with a detective knocking on a door, especially during the Joanne Taylor search. Multiple dozens of townships and counties and municipalities in Ohio. And then I couldn't even put a number on how many nationally have assisted, and we've sent tips out too that have helped us. But I don't think I'd be exaggerating when I'd say well over 100.
Okay, so is it safe to say then that law enforcement had every support that they would have needed to
Yes.
attempt to investigate this case?
Yes, the FBI has been phenomenal. They have opened up their books and their resources to us. The Michigan State Police has given me everything that I could have asked for as the lead investigator. There hasn't been anyone we've talked to once they understand the magnitude of this case that has not fully given us their support.
Okay. And you testified earlier to John's cell phone data showing that he was traveling on the early morning of November 26th from between Michigan to Ohio and then back to Michigan, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and based on your professional opinion, what do you believe John was doing during that time period?
My initial thought, or my thoughts, are probably that as the phone started getting into Ohio, I think we had a good track on the phone for about a half hour. Whatever it was he did at that point, he probably just shut the phone off to avoid detection. And then once he got back home and knew he had his bearings again, the phone came back on.
Okay, so if you know, what was the length of time that the phone was off to when he was back home?
I believe we had a little over an hour to hour and a half.
Okay, so is it safe to say he couldn't have really gone that far in that time period?
Correct. I mean, he could also shut the phone off and just driven, a totally different direction. But either way, he only had probably time to drive at the most 60 to 70 miles and back.
Okay. And when you reviewed the evidence regarding the Skelton home that was searched on November 26th of 2010, what were your initial thoughts on what had occurred in that home?
So I remember one of the first things that I saw was the rope that he allegedly tried to hang himself with. When I looked at that, I didn't laugh because it was funny. It was almost humorous that he would claim that, because it was, I have called it a shoestring. I've always kind of referred to it as that because it was so thin. Anyone in their right mind that would try to hang themselves from a very weak banister would not use that, in my opinion. So that was one of the first things that stuck out to me. Also thought it was very curious about all the different tie straps and tie downs that were cut. It just seemed very odd. I mean, the house was, from the photo, I was not there at that time, but I saw, I poured over the photos. The house was just destroyed. He didn't want Tanya to get anything out of it, so he just destroyed everything. But the tie down straps that were cut, obviously, to me was very, very interesting. One of the other things that I thought was very odd was in one of the bedrooms, or one of the areas where there were some mattresses. There were at least one or two that had a sheet on them and had stuffed animals and toys that seemed normal, and then there was one that was completely bare, appearing to me as if something on that bed was recently removed, as to why it wouldn't look like the other two. So those are some of the things that really stuck out, along with the fact that, again, he just destroyed everything. If he pulled off this heist of the century and got his kids safe with this group to keep him away from Tanya, he should be the happiest guy in the world, because his kids are now safe. Why does he have to try to kill himself? Why does he have to destroy everything? And why does he have to leave a suicide note? It just doesn't. His story and the facts of it don't make sense.
Okay. And you just stated that you believe he destroyed everything in the home so that Tanya couldn't get any of it. Do you believe that's the same thing that he did with the boys, basically?
Absolutely. I believe, yes.
And you mentioned testing a baseball in 2015 that was found in Ohio for DNA, and said it came back that it was not the DNA of any of the Skelton boys. So you actually have DNA then
Yes.
from the boys?
Yes.
Okay. And has that DNA ever been imputed into any databases?
Yes. Yep.
What databases?
The University of North Texas houses that database. It's called NamUs. And that database is constantly updated. There's constant DNA information being inputted in that. And to my understanding, there's kind of a revolving stuff that's going on behind the scenes all the time, to where if there's a missing persons found in Oregon, and that database that's entered into NamUs, and if it were to hit one of the Skelton boys, we would get notified of that. So there's checks continuously going on all the time with that National Clearinghouse.
Okay. And this underground group that John alleges he gave the children to, do you know what was the name of the group that John was alleging?
I believe he said Underground Sanctuary.
Okay. And did John ever tell you or anybody else that you would have reviewed those records of how he allegedly found this group?
Out of all the stories he told, he met some folks on the side of the road that he was helping change a tire, and within a few short minutes trusted him enough to tell him his whole life story, and that he wanted to hide his kids, and that they happened just to be part of the Underground Sanctuary, and within a couple of weeks he sent them off to them.
Were there any ever statements made with regards to any business cards being given to him or anything like that?
There was some secret envelopes and secret numbers that John allegedly was given, that he even said something along the lines, these numbers to different newspaper articles that would come out that would then have some type of code that he would understand of where to find the boys. It was just way out there. It didn't make any sense. And he had indicated that either he had burned those secret envelopes or that the police took them during the search warrant. And to my knowledge, there was none of that secret numbers envelopes were ever found when we obtained the property of the evidence.
Okay. And aside from this case, have you ever investigated any other potential homicide cases?
Yes.
Okay. And in any of those other cases, were there ever any claims made like the ones that John just made that you just testified to that ended up coming out to be true?
No, nothing even close.
In your professional opinion, is it likely that John Skelton could have found this alleged underground sanctuary group, but none of the law enforcement agencies, which you just testified there were hundreds, none of them found them, but John Skelton did.
Right. That's absolutely absurd.
And with regards to Moses Gingrich, isn't it true that the TV show he was actually on was one that was airing within the prison where John was being housed?
Yes, I believe it's either Learning Channel or Discovery Channel or something that he would have had access to that prison.
Okay. So you believe that's at the point when he came up with that story that he had probably seen that on the TV?
It's not a stretch to say that John saw one of his shows in prison and then that planted a seed in his mind to throw that to us as a distraction.
Okay. And during the investigation, were there ever any data analyst searches conducted by the Michigan State Police?
Yes.
Okay. And was there one specific person that was dedicated to doing those searches?
Yes. Well, throughout the years, we've had several that have been involved helping us in different things. More recently, we've got a cold case analyst. Her name's Kelly Hodges, that has kind of gotten us up to speed, done searches from, initially from 2010 all the way up to present day. And she can go into more of that, of what her job is with that.
Okay. Are you aware of if the boys had passports?
I do not believe that they did.
Prior to you coming onto this case, when you were reviewing the evidence, you were made aware of the comments made by John to the FBI agents with regards to the children potentially being in an old schoolhouse in Ohio or potentially being in a dumpster. You're aware of those?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that John told the authorities, even prior to telling the authorities to search those places, that the children were actually safe with people like Joanne Taylor?
Right.
Okay, so did it make any sense to you when you were reviewing that John would tell authorities to search those places if he believed the children were safe?
No, the context made perfect sense because all he has done is lie, but what came out of his mouth was completely contradictory from what he had said weeks before.
Okay. And you testified earlier that age progressions of the children had been done.
Correct.
Are you aware of how many of those have been done?
I believe they do them every other year. We have not done them recently. I think we had at least 3 or 4 sets, so it would have encompassed 8 years or so of the time they've been missing.
Okay. And when those age progressions were released, did the Michigan State Police receive any tips with regards to those updated pictures?
We would receive tips. A lot of times we would receive tips when we put things out there, but of late it's really been from more of like the psychics and the mediums. Nothing that's, hey, I believe these boys were seen in, Columbus, Ohio at a coffee shop. Nothing like that we could actually go out and investigate. So yeah, nothing's really panned out from those.
Okay. Is there any doubt in your mind that these 3 boys are deceased and have been since November 26th of 2010?
No doubt.
And you already testified about some of your investigation and the findings that led you to this conclusion, but is it accurate to state that there's way more evidence and information than what you just sat here and testified to today that leads you to believe that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And is there any of that other evidence that you haven't had a chance to testify to today that you think is relevant enough to this case of finding that the children are deceased that you would like to testify to?
No, I think we've covered the highlights for sure.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Any reason we should not thank and excuse this witness?
Please do.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time and your testimony. Welcome to be on your way.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Mr. Kessler.
We will call Kelly Hodges. Do we need it? These are all injured.
Yes, there.
So I'm gonna leave them cool,
That's fine.
and just let me know when you're done.
Sure. Yep. Is anybody going to recess before we go any further, or a break?
All right, I would say let's do this witness, and then we could take a recess for the next one. She's just right down the hall.
Very well.
She'll be right here.
Okay.
Hi, you can come up here. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? There's a step here, be careful.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Would you like to state and spell your name for the record?
Kelly Hodges, Kellylydges.
Thank you. Mr. Casper?
Thank you, Aaron. Ms. Hodges, where are you employed?
Michigan State Police.
And how long have you been with the Michigan State Police?
About 4 years.
4 years. What is your job there?
I am a criminal intelligence analyst and I'm assigned to the cold case unit.
So what kind of things do you do?
Criminal intelligence analysts provide case support for investigators. We do everything from attempt to locate, person workups, proof of life checks, cell phone analysis, and other special requests.
Can you tuck up just a little closer to
Yep.
those microphones? Thank you.
So you had some training
I
in doing this. Could you tell us about that?
Yep, I have received about 7 years of training in different departments as well. I've done local and state different databases through law enforcement trainings. I've been through some government trainings as well and specialized trainings with major case investigations, narcotics, and other additional trainings.
So how did you become involved with the Skelton case?
I was asked in the summer of 2024 to do a proof of life check for the 3 boys.
Okay. What is that? What is a proof of life check?
A proof of life check is a verification process that we have to see if individuals are still alive. In those checks, we go through some different databases. Some of those databases include law enforcement databases, commercial databases, and federal government databases.
So I know you just named a few, but how many are there? I mean, and you don't have to be exact. Are we talking 10, 20?
I checked about 20 different databases that we have access to at the state police.
So you looked at 20 different databases in doing a proof of life check.
Yes.
What kind of things are you looking for?
We're looking for any indication that they are alive, whether that's hitting on their social security number, any arrest records, any warrants, any traffic stops, anything like that.
What'd you find out?
Not much.
Okay.
My searches indicated nothing, just the original case report.
So there was proof of life before November 26, 2010,
Correct.
and there's been no proof of life since November 26, 2010.
Correct.
So there's nothing that you found
No.
that would show that any of these 3 boys are alive.
No.
I have no further questions at this time.
Ms. Stang?
When was the most recent search for life performed?
My last proof of life search was, I believe, in August of 2024.
Okay, and nothing was found at that point?
No.
Okay. And do those search of life searches actually look into like social media platforms?
Yes.
Okay. What about phone records?
Yes.
Do those also look into the NamUs database?
Yes.
Have you used the age progression photos as part of those searches as well?
Yep. I actually did facial recognition, and I did that through Michigan State Police and then all the other states that participate in that. And I used both the original photos and the age progressed photos.
Okay. And for those, the facial recognition, is that used at places like the airports and things like that?
I cannot confirm. I'm not sure how that works, but it does check a variety of different sources.
Okay. Is there anything else that you haven't testified to today that you think is relevant to add?
I did check federal databases, and I did not see anything. A lot of those databases do check interstate records. Some of them are also located at different parts of the country, so like near the southern border of Texas. We had a very big search throughout the United States and we did not find anything.
Okay, I have nothing further, thank you.
Thank you.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Any reason we should not thank and excuse Ms. Hodges?
Please do so.
Yes.
Thank you for your time and your
Thank you.
testimony.
Now we can take a short recess.
Okay, all right, sounds good. We'll see you all. We are back on record with all of our parties and attorneys. Mr. Castleberry, we look forward to your next witness.
Your Honor, we call Tanya Zuvers.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
There's a step here, be careful.
Thank you, Your
You're welcome.
Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please state your name for the record?
Tanya Zuvers,
Could you spell your name?
Tanyazuvers,
And what city do you live in?
Morenci.
And is that in Illinois County, Michigan?
Yes,
And how long have you lived in Morenci?
my whole life.
How old are you today?
58.
It's part of the record. I want to take you back in time, Tanya, to when you met John Skelton and married John Skelton. When did you marry John Skelton?
September of '02.
And did you have children with Mr. Skelton?
Yes, I did.
And what were their names?
Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner.
And is that order that you just told me, is that their
Yes,
progressive?
yes.
At some point, these three children, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, could you describe Andrew for us?
Andrew was my smart as a whip, wasn't a computer or video game that he could not conquer. I want to say he was probably around 4 or 5 and he was playing a video game and the girls had friends over and he did something on this video game. One of the friends said, "Whoa, wait a minute. I've been playing this game forever. I didn't know it did that. Show me how you did that." So here's this little 4-year-old showing this teenager how to play this video game. And so he was
Smart.
very smart. They all three were very smart.
But we're not here to determine who's the smartest.
No.
I want a little bit of a description of each of the children.
Sure.
What about Alex?
He was very inquisitive. If he could take it apart and put it back together, he was happy. He loved to be friends with his sister's friends. They were his girlfriends, he liked to call them. He was going to be my ladies' man, I do believe. But fascinated with cell phones. Like, we always joke that someday he would be a cell phone programmer or builder or something like that because he was so into how does it work, and that, you know, he just thought that was neat.
Yes. About Tanner.
Tanner was my baby. He had been 5 for 1 month when they went missing. Had just started in big school, was so excited to be in big school like his brothers. He was still had that little babiness to him. but he could tell stories, and he could tell them, and you would believe him because he would tell stories that were almost believable, and you're kind of going, I don't know, and then he would go, I'm just messing with you, and you're going, how do you do this, you know? But yeah,
It's safe to
But-
say they were all pretty sharp children.
yeah, they were, and they were each other's best friends. They were the stuff that they, you know, very rarely did they fight. They were, you know, but they were only like a year and 11 months apart, each of them, and so they were built-in best friends.
Right. Now, we're gonna get into some things that are not so happy.
Right.
That is, at some point, the marriage with John Skelton started to have problems. When was that?
September 13th of 2010, when he signed my sons out of school, telling the school that he was taking them on a family vacation to Florida that I had no idea was happening and was not invited to be a part of.
Were you guys still together? on that?
Yes, we were.
And what did you do in response to that?
My first call was to talk with a police officer. It happened to be Chief Larry Weeks, is who came. He told me that he would call John and see if he could get John to come to the police station and we could sit and talk. And while we were waiting for him to come to the police station, my daughters, who were older, both adults,
These are not children with John Skelton, correct?
correct, they are not children with John Skelton. They are from my first husband. They came to Adrian on my behalf and met with an attorney and found out that the only way to prevent John from taking the children was, or for me to get custody of them, that I needed to file for divorce. And I said, well, do whatever you have to. In the back of my mind, I had always heard, you know, if they take them out of state, you have a hard time getting them back, you know, and I didn't know any of that. So I'm like, do what you have to do to get me custody.
Okay.
And we'll cross the next bridge when we get to it. I don't want him taking them out of state until we've had time to discuss this further. So when he came to the police station, I said to him, I said, so how long do you plan on being in Florida? He said, I don't know, 3 weeks, a month, I don't know. I'll put him in school down there if we're going to be too long. And I said, well, you realize to enroll them in any school, you have to have birth certificates, you have to have social security numbers. You don't have any of that. And so we talked. I said, you know, we can go home. I can find that information for you. Just kind of playing his hand for a little bit just to see if I could get him to hold off. So we went to the house and I looked, pretty much found all the paperwork I needed right away, but I still had not heard from my daughters that everything had been signed and filed. So I was kind of holding off, and I don't even know how long we were at the house, and he come out of his he had a room where his computer was, and he came out and he started yelling at me, and he said, "You've been lying to me," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Well, apparently when he decided to take them, he had made an appointment with an attorney and was going to consult. He claims he was just going to see what he could legally do about taking them to Florida. And ironically, he had the appointment with the same attorney that I had already retained. And that attorney called him and told him that they couldn't represent him because I had retained him. And so he started yelling and saying that I was lying and whatever, that he said, "I'm out of here, I'm taking the boys with me," and he started yelling at the boys to get in the van. And Tanner was behind me, so I was able to keep him, and the other two were crying, and they got in the van because their dad got to them. He was in front of me going out of the house, and he made them get in the van, and he ended up taking off, and he made it to Florida with them.
Okay. What happened next?
So, my mom, my youngest daughter, and I left for Florida on a Wednesday. We drove all night. We got into Jacksonville around noon. We went to the police station with my papers that
Now these papers, you had gotten an ex parte custody order.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
And so you took that paper.
I took that paperwork with me and I said, "What can you do?" And everything was lined up for us. I think that officer walked us across the street to the courthouse, told us exactly what department we needed to go to. We went there. We showed the lady, "This is what we have. We need to have this turned into Florida verbiage." And we picked that up the next day. And around, I want to say it was around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it was a Friday, I called the sheriff's department. I said, "I have this order and I need someone to serve it." And they knocked on the apartment door where he was staying, brought Andrew and Alexander out to me, and we left. But we had to stay in Florida for the weekend because the judge wanted to talk with both John and I before she allowed us to come home.
Now, you've thrown out different days of the week, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
I know, and I don't.
So it's okay, but I want to make clear for the court that, you did give a date to start. That was September 13th. And all of those days that you just referenced, the Friday was September 7th. So it's right away. There's no delay.
Right. It was all that same week.
I mean, he left with the kids. You got an ex parte order the next day. The next day, you're on the way to Florida. Is that right?
Correct, on Wednesday.
You get there, you are immediately going to the court to get the order enforced, correct?
Yes.
And now you're to the point where you have to come back on Monday, which would have been September 20th.
Right.
What did the judge say?
Well, we initially I was just gonna go in the courtroom by myself, and we were sitting in the hotel room, and my mom and I were talking, and we decided we probably ought to find an attorney, that maybe we should do that. We're in a strange town, and it's huge.
You're talking about Jacksonville?
Jacksonville, Florida. And I don't even remember how we chose this attorney. I think we just opened the phone book and pointed because they actually had phone books back then. We went and we met with this attorney. He met me on Monday the 20th. He met me at the court, and he and I went in, and John showed up with an attorney. And the first thing out of their mouth was my history. I had been in trouble, and so they brought that up. And the judge in Florida, and I cannot remember her name, she went into her chambers and called up here and talked to Judge Noe, and their decision between the two of them, they both were in agreement that we jointly bring them back to Michigan together, and then once we got to the state line, then the custody agreement that Judge Noe had signed became effective.
Which gave you?
Which
full
gave
custody.
me full custody of the boys.
So you get back to Michigan, and then on the next day, it'll be September 21st, you're back in Michigan.
I think we got back on the 21st, like late, I can't.
But you didn't go home when I say, is you were living at Congress Street
Right.
before you left. When you came back, where'd you go?
I moved to my mom and dad's house with the boys
Okay.
for a couple weeks, and then I found I had a house I was living in with them.
So you get back to Michigan and you go to your parents' house, but you realize you don't have your stuff, right?
Hmm.
Did you go back to Congress Street to retrieve your belongings?
We did, and I moved out, what I needed for the boys. I moved out necessities. And then once I got the house, then we kind of split up some of the furniture.
Was there an argument over a curio cabinet?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about it.
So I was living in the Congress Street address, and before I left to go to Florida, we moved the curio cabinet out because at that point, I'm trying to remember. Anyways, we moved the curio cabinet out, and when John got home, when we got back from Florida, he flipped out that the curio cabinet was gone. He called me up. He's like, "Where's this at? What did you do with it?" I said, "That was mine. You gave that to me as a housewarming gift when we bought the house." And he's like, "I paid for that. That's mine." Okay, we moved it back.
This is the same curio cabinet that was found smashed to pieces.
Yes, sir.
So you're back in Michigan. You get the boys back in school.
I did.
Did you get them into counseling?
I sure did.
What happened next? Did you start a discussion with your attorney about parenting time?
We did, and when I think back and I look in my papers, we had dates, but we never made it to those dates to get things finalized through the courts because the boys disappeared.
But in your discussion with your attorney, did you guys, and I know John Skelton had an attorney as well, is that right?
Correct.
And so in the discussions between your attorneys, did you work out some Thanksgiving parenting time?
We did. We worked out some parenting time. I had agreed to allow him to have half of the Thanksgiving vacation. And then I would get them back on Black Friday.
And what time were you supposed to get back?
Between 3 and 4 o'clock. I don't remember the exact time.
But if I said 3 o'clock, would that be?
Yeah.
So Thanksgiving's always on a Thursday. Did you
Correct.
have a phone call with John on Wednesday night?
I may have.
Do you have any recollection of arguing over him telling the children that you went to jail?
I know that I had a conversation with him on that Monday night, I believe it was, when the boys came home and told me. I called him, and he tried to say that they overheard him talking on the phone, and that he didn't mean anything by it, that they were listening and not where they weren't supposed to be or something. And I said, why are you even having conversations with someone on a phone like that when you have the boys with you? Why would you even do that?
So the kids asked you?
They told me that Daddy said that I went to jail.
I assume you were upset.
Well, just a little.
So he then takes the boys for the Thanksgiving holiday.
Correct.
And where did you spend Thanksgiving?
I went to my sister's house in Kunkel, Ohio, to do our normal family get together, make crafts and have fun. And
did John try to contact you that day?
I think so. Yeah.
And did you talk to him?
Not till that evening.
So you didn't want to be bothered?
Well, no,
There
I
was
mean,
no
if it's
messages.
if it's an emergency, you can call me, but you don't need to keep texting me and blowing my phone up. You're supposed to be spending time with your sons.
So later in that afternoon, did you eventually have a conversation with him?
We did talk.
What'd you talk about?
I honestly don't remember. I'm sure I said something about blowing my phone up, and then the whole having to tell the boys, and I know that we had a fight on that phone that night. And I had told him, because he had asked me if I ever thought we could get back together, and I said, no, I don't think we can after what's happened this week. I don't know how I could.
And you think this was Thanksgiving evening?
Yes.
So what is your next contact with John?
I think I texted him either Friday morning or Friday early afternoon, wanted to know if I could pick the boys up earlier than the 3 o'clock.
And why did you want to pick them up early?
My dad and I were gonna take the younger grandchildren and go see if we could find clothing, apparel for my nephew's football team. He was playing in the state football finals at Ford Field.
He played for Hudson.
He played for Hudson. And so we were going to go see if we could find them Hudson Tiger sweatshirts, because we only have Morenci Bulldog sweatshirts at our house. So, and the boys were so excited when my dad would talk to them about going to watch this game, and that we were going to be inside and we didn't have to wear coats. They just couldn't understand that, because every football game they'd ever gone to was outside and it was cold. So they were excited, and so we thought that would be kind of fun to take and go find orange and black clothes.
That's it. So what was John's response?
He said, well, we're not home right now. We went to my friend's house. We're north of Jackson. I don't know when we'll be home. I said, well, just keep in touch with me and let me know. And so we left it at that. Well, then I saw movement at his house. And
Now, let me stop you for a second.
I have to say how I saw movement out my kitchen window.
So where you were staying?
Where I was staying, between the neighbor's tree and house and across the empty lot, I could see his driveway.
Okay.
I saw a vehicle pull in his house, and I saw 2 people come out and get in the car and leave. And no, that's kind of weird. So I messaged him. I'm like, hey, are you home? And he's like, no. And then that's when he tells me that, actually, the boys aren't with me. I was home. The boys are with my friend. She's bringing them home at 3 o'clock. I'm on my way because I fell off the ladder. I'm going to the hospital. I don't know. I hurt my foot. I said, okay. And I knew he was doing some house remodel or something. So
Those two people, was that Kelsey Burrows?
I found out later that it was Kelsey Borowski picking him up to take him to the hospital.
And who is Kelsey Burrows?
She would be his cousin's daughter.
So she's taking John to the hospital?
Yes.
So, 3 o'clock comes, are there any kids?
No.
4 o'clock comes.
Nothing. And my attorney had told me that he said, now right at 4 o'clock or 4:01, you don't need to be calling right away to report them, but I know you're gonna. He said, you gotta give them a little leeway or whatever. And I said, no, at 4:01, I'm calling because something's not right. So I called and I was told that Morency's officer was
Who'd you call?
911. Morency's officer is not available, but we will have him get into contact with you when he gets back to town. A couple phone calls later, still not available. So my dad and brother-in-law take a drive and they find Morency's officer. And he said, it was Officer Hillard. He said, well, they told me to just get a hold of her later tonight. He goes, I didn't know it was right away. And so then they explained what was going on, and he came right over. And that's when he went in the house to do a welfare check and found mass destruction.
So, were you with Officer Hillard?
I was not. I was, my aunt and uncle lived up the street, and so I went to their house just because we all just had a bad feeling. And I made the decision I didn't want to be there if something bad was happening. So
when the police went to enter this home, was the back door wedged?
yes. When my sister and I went there and we kind of were walking around the house to see if we could see in, the only place we really could see in was the back door. And I still had a key for it, but I couldn't get the door open. We noticed that he had taken a 2x4 and wedged it against the door and against the steps that went up into the dining room so that you couldn't get in the house.
So did the police have to force their way in?
I understand that they did, yes.
What happened next?
He went through the house, did not find the boys.
Now, at some point, you found out that John had tried to commit.
Yeah, and that's what I was just trying to think. Because I remember, I'm pretty sure I made that phone call from Mom and Dad, so I must have went back to my Mom and Dad's house. And I called to Fulton County Health Center, and I asked to speak to the nurse taking care of him. And the nurse, he said, well, are you two still married? And I said, yes, we're still married. I've filed for divorce. And he said, well, technically you're still his wife, so I'm going to tell you. John is here because he tried to kill himself. And that was the first I heard that.
Okay.
And I said, okay, does he have 3 children with him? And I explained to them, you know, my sons we can't find them. They're not at the house. John had them. Claims there's a woman that had them, but there's nothing. And he said, no, ma'am, there are no children here with him.
And did you relay this information to the police?
Yes.
And what did they do that you know of?
I know that Officer Hillard went down to Fulton County. And then pretty much the next thing that I heard, or that I can recall, Chief Weeks called and wanted to have a sit down, him and I. And I want to say it was like 1 a.m. or something. And so one of my sisters and I and my dad went to the police station to sit down. Chief Weeks said that this is, we have the Amber Alert, and in another couple hours, this is not going to look like Morency's police station because we have people coming in from all over to look for your sons and find out what John did.
Now, over the next, I know this is difficult, and if you need to take a break, you just let me know.
Okay.
And the court will, I think the court will understand. Over the next several days, there were obviously multiple search parties that were put out.
Yes.
Are you aware of that?
I was vaguely.
How were you getting updates?
Pardon?
How were you getting updates?
There was an FBI agent that was assigned to come to the house periodically with updates. And there was also, I'm not going to remember exactly what her title was, but she was kind of there beside me pretty much through daytime hours.
Like victim services?
No, she was a doctor of psychiatry or something.
Okay.
And so she was just there with us, and if I had questions or if we needed something, and she would help to kind of understand after the agents would leave, and if I had questions about what they told us or that type of thing.
So the children were on some medication.
2 of them.
Okay, who was that? Which two?
Alexander and Tanner both had asthma and had daily pill that they had to take, and then they also had rescue inhaler and a breathing machine if things got really bad. And in this fall, it was
Is the breathing machine a nebulizer?
yes.
And did you find out at some point that medication was still at the house on Congress Street?
Yes.
Did you also find out that the coats and boots of the children
Yes.
were given to John Skelton's aunt?
I did not know where they found them. I know that they came to the house to have me identify that was their stuff, but I never knew where they found them.
Did you know that their toothbrushes were also?
No, I did not know about the toothbrushes.
Okay. You've learned that since?
Yes.
You learned about the curio cabinet being destroyed?
I saw that because they did take me to the house. They said, we know you didn't live here, but it hasn't been that long since you've lived here, and you might be able to point out things that might not be obvious, except that everything was destroyed.
Now, there was a suicide note that was written to you. You aware of that?
I know there was one written. I've never seen it.
Were you told about it?
Yes.
In these updates, were you being told about the lies that John was telling about the different scenarios of where children?
I don't think really in the beginning right away. I know it's just, that time was so foggy for
I
me,
understand.
because I felt like I was living somebody's nightmare.
It's okay. We only want you to talk about what you remember.
Yeah, and I,
Okay? Remember in our conversations, we don't wanna guess.
right,
We only wanna talk about what you know.
correct.
Okay? At some point, and this was not very long after November 26, 2010, the FBI came to you and told you that your children are probably not alive.
Correct.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Did you want to believe it?
No.
Did you want to hold out hope that they were alive? Yeah.
And I did for quite a while.
So, at some point, this case gets turned over to the Michigan State Police.
Hmm.
You have to say yes or no.
Yes.
And you meet Detective Sergeant at the time, Jeremy Brewer.
Yes, I did.
And I think you and Mr. Brewer became very close. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I think you had many in-depth discussions with Mr. Brewer about what happened in this case. Is that right?
Yes.
And at some point, you knew that your children were no longer alive.
Correct.
Do you remember when that was?
I don't remember the exact moment. I think it came on slowly, in that I logically, I said from day one, my sons are smart. If my sons are out there in the world with someone they don't know, one of them, because the three of them work together very well, one of them, and more than likely it would have been Alexander. He was my more vocal, social, would just tell the person next to them, this isn't my mom or dad. And I know that if you call this number, my mom will answer. And
And in fact, they knew how to call 911
they did.
because they'd done it, correct?
I found that out.
Do you know who killed your children?
John Skelton.
Is there any doubt in your mind that John Skelton killed your children?
There is no doubt in my mind.
Is there any doubt in your mind that John Skelton killed your children on November 26th, on or about November 26th, 2010?
No, there is no doubt.
You know if your children were alive, they would have found you.
Yes, they would have.
So today they would all be adults, correct?
Correct.
So any explanation that you've ever been told or heard about why John Skelton would have hidden them? They're adults today.
Correct.
They could walk through that door right now,
Wish they could.
but they can't.
No,
Why is that?
because John killed them.
I know a lot of people have asked questions about why are you doing this?
Correct.
And you and I have had some long discussions about that. We talked about a headstone.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that one of the things you wanted to make clear to the court is that it's important to you that you want to be able to put a date on that headstone. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that date November 26, 2010?
Yes.
You're asking the court to declare what you know happened that John Skelton killed your children on November 26, 2010. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you think this shows respect to the children that we are doing this?
Yes, it does. Because their dad showed them no respect. And I shouldn't even say their dad. John Skelton showed them no respect. Because any loving father would not have done what he did. And I owe them the respect that we may not have their bodies, but they're still, their lives still meant something, and there is a place to go.
They deserve a death certificate.
They do.
Penny, I'm proud of you and the courage you've shown.
Thank you.
I have no further questions at this time.
Go ahead, Ms. Sting.
Hi, I know
Hello.
you testified that the boys would all be adults now, but can you tell us exactly how old Andrew would be today?
Andrew would be 20. I'm going to get it wrong because it's 25, but he would be 23.
Okay. And what about Alexander
He would be 21,
and Tanner?
and Tanner would be 19.
Okay. Earlier, you testified that you didn't want to be present at the time that the house was searched by Officer Hilliard on November 26th of 2010 in case they found something. Did you have that initial gut feeling on that day at that time that the boys were no longer alive?
I don't know that I had the initial gut feeling, but something told me that this wasn't just a case that a friend, as John Skelton told me, had the boys. When the door was wedged shut and we couldn't get into the house, that's just not normal. People don't do that. And so I think in the back of my mind, I was afraid that we were going to find 3 bodies in there. And I didn't want to be there for that.
You've heard some testimony today about the children and passports, and it sounds like none of the law enforcement were 100% sure on that question. So can you answer that question?
They do not have passports.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And over the years, what all did you personally do to help attempt to find the boys?
Oh my goodness. We, first off, social media, sharing, missing flyers, aiding with age progression through National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Any interview that I could do, we did a story with John Walsh. He came out. Podcast, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to on podcasts or done countless interviews with anybody to just get the information out there.
Did you participate in any of the searches that were done?
I did not.
Okay, why not?
I couldn't. Family did. I was just,
Do you have that same fear that you had on November 26th?
I think so. It was, I was living somebody's nightmare. And at that point, I didn't know what end was up. So to go out and participate in public, and no offense to media, but I was nowhere ready to face anybody with a camera or a microphone.
Now, there was was testimony regarding Alexander calling 911 on that day that he was with John and, felt scared or alone or
Right.
he couldn't find his dad when both of them had been in the house the whole time. So did you teach your kids about 911?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we, along with your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s and your address and your name and who's your mom and who's your dad, and you learn about. That was just an automatic mom thing. You teach them about 911, and like I said, Alex was fascinated with phones anyway. So am I surprised that he's the one that would have done something like that? No. He was my very vocal child.
Okay. And do you believe that if your sons were out there and had the opportunity to call 911 in the past 15 years, they would have?
Definitely.
And you heard the testimony today from all of the law enforcement personnel that the boys hadn't been heard from or seen since November 26, 2010, correct?
Correct.
Does that lead you to believe as well that the boys are deceased?
Yes.
I have nothing further, thank you.
If you're comfortable, I'd like to hear a little bit about the dynamics between you and John. And what that environment was like. And if you're not comfortable enough to share, I understand.
No. I thought we were in a happy marriage. I mean, couples have problems, they have fights. He had at one point mentioned that he would like to move to Florida, or at least go down there and try to look for a job. And I said to him, I said, we can't just uproot and move to Florida. School just started. There's processes. When are you thinking you want to do this? And this was like the weekend before he took them to Florida. And he said, well, in a couple months or whatever. And I said, because of my criminal past, there are things that I have to look into before I can just up and move. I can't just, we have to find out. And I said, I can make those phone calls on Monday and say, what do I have to do to move? Apprehensive about it just because Morenci is a small town. Everybody there knew what I had done. I had paid my time. I was welcomed back into the community. Going somewhere new where nobody knows me. I think ultimately that was John Skelton's goal, was to get me where I didn't have family and friends and I had to rely on him. So when I got the phone call from the school, I was completely shocked because I was like we all went to bed at the same time last night in the house, and he was supposedly going to work, but apparently he left but didn't go to work because he came back and took the boys from school, and I don't know, I'm just...
Did you feel at other times as though there was an attempt to isolate or create a situation where you were dependent on him?
He was very jealous of any relationship that I had with, whether it was my parents, my siblings, my children, my daughters, my sons, friends, and I find out after the fact the whole cafe mom thing. He was very jealous of that. He had gone through a divorce with his first wife, and she came and got custody of his daughter, and so he lost his daughter, and I never wanted to have that be something between us, but I think that I don't even know where his mind was or what. It's like he became somebody different overnight.
Was there ever any other time that he had done something sort of just rash and impulsive that you couldn't necessarily explain?
Not really that I can think of I mean, he liked to drink and like binge drink, and then he was, I don't even know how to explain it. In looking back, he was all about himself, and it was his needs and wants before anybody else's, and just he was on the road a lot with the truck. So a lot of times I felt like I was a single mom anyways, because he was gone for days at a time. So the boys and I had a routine. And then he would come home and things would be good for a couple days when he was home, and then I don't know if it was insecurities but for the most part we went camping, the boys played soccer, we always outside playing. He was building a treehouse in the backyard for the boys and kind of starting to teach them about building and making cuts and using a hammer, and then it was like one day this switch flipped and just became somebody that none of us recognized.
Thank you for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Any questions based on my questions, counselors?
No, thank you.
Any other questions?
No,
Thank you so much for your testimony. All right, Mr. Castleberry, any other witnesses for today?
No, Your Honor, the petitioner rests.
Ms. Stagg, do you anticipate any witnesses?
no, I have no witnesses. Thank you.
All right. Are you prepared to proceed with closings, or would you
I
like to?
I am.
Okay. All right,
Yes.
go ahead whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, we've been here since basically 9 o'clock this morning. I'm not gonna insult the court's intelligence and summarize everything that happened here today. You've heard it. And it's all in one day, which is actually good for the memory. Obviously, there are some things on the timeline that was entered that I do think is important for the court to consider. However, I think what is really important is that the petitioner in this matter is Ms. Zuvers. She spent the past 14 plus years mourning her missing children. Every day since November 26, 2010, she has hoped and prayed that her children would return alive and safe. You just heard her testify that she had to come to grips with the fact that that's not going to happen. She knows that they're dead. She knows that they died on or about November 26, 2010. She has prayed this whole time that her heart would heal and someone would provide information on their whereabouts, even though she knew they weren't alive. She's hoped beyond all hope that the last person to see them alive, Tanner Skelton, would offer any plausible explanation. he didn't even bother to show up today. He doesn't want any part of anything to do with these children because he murdered them. And he murdered them on or about November 26, 2010. It's time that we declare these children dead. The Michigan legislature contemplated situations like this, which is why this morning when I started off about the presumption of death, there's no doubt that these children are presumed to be dead. But you've heard today from the Morenci Police Department, you've heard from the Michigan State Police, you've heard from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, you've heard from an expert on proof of life, and most importantly, you've heard from the mother of these children, and everybody told you the same thing. The evidence is clear. These children were murdered at the hands of John Skelton on November 26, 2010. I feel that we have proven this beyond clear and convincing evidence for sure. Definitely sufficient evidence. And I am asking that the court enter an order giving these children what they deserve, which is a date of death, a death certificate, and some closure for this family to end this nightmare. Although we know they'll never recover from this. They do deserve this justice. Thank you.
Ms. Day.
In a typical case before this court, during this hearing, I would have been sitting at this table with my clients. However, as you have observed, I have been sitting at that table alone. And I've been sitting there on behalf of Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton, who could not be here today with us because they are deceased. This is not a typical case. It's both a unique and chilling experience as an attorney to have 3 clients that I've never had the opportunity to meet or speak with and will never have that opportunity. Based on the overwhelming amount of evidence that has been presented in this matter, and on behalf of my clients, Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton, I am joining the petitioner's request to have these 3 boys declared deceased and a finding that they have been deceased since on or about November 26th of 2010. Although I never got to meet any of my clients, I know that if they had been given to some unknown group or person, like John Skelton alleged over the years that the children had been given to, or were anywhere out there at any point after November 26th of 2010, at some point those boys would have found a way to make contact with someone to let them know that they were scared and that they weren't where they were supposed to be. How do I know this? I know this because on November 21st, 2010, just 5 days before the boys would never be heard from or seen again, 7-year-old Alexander Skelton made that phone call that you heard testimony about today to the police while he was at his father's home because he was scared when he couldn't find his father, John Skelton. It turned out that John Skelton was just upstairs in the home, but 7-year-old Alexander knew to call 911 because he felt scared and couldn't find the person that he looked up to and that he knew was responsible for caring for him, or was supposed to be. Tanya Zuvers also testified to the boys' intelligence and ability to call 911 or give someone their address or even their mom's phone number. This evidence shows that Alexander Skelton knew to call 911 whenever he felt that he needed help. I don't need to go back through all of the evidence that was put on today. We all heard it. The evidence and testimony that has been put on during this hearing, which hundreds of law enforcement agencies have been involved in over the last 15 years, shows you that there is no doubt in any reasonable person's mind that these boys are alive. Or not alive, sorry. As you have heard through the testimony today, the Morenci Police Department, the Michigan State Police, the FBI, Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton's mother, and I too am convinced that these boys have been deceased since on or about November 26th of 2015. I am hoping that you too, Judge, are convinced of the same. And I am respectfully requesting under MCL 700.1208 on behalf of the 3 boys who were taken from this world far too young that you make a finding that they are deceased and have been since that date.
Well, I would like an opportunity to finish reading through the exhibits and the slides that were provided today and to think over everything that I've been able to listen to today and review the file. But I also don't want to make you wait very much longer for an answer. So what I would like to do is ask everyone, if you would, to come back on Wednesday, the 5th. This trial was scheduled previously for all 3 days. So if I take tomorrow, that gives me enough time to review everything and to prepare the order. And I'll give you the opinion and order on Wednesday the 5th at 9 a.m. if you'd like to be